to share with you 10 biographies and memoirs that I love. Now, 3 things before I get started. Number 1, this is not a top 10 list, so these aren't ranked, although I did save the one that I think is the absolute best for last. Number 2, a lot of my interests as a musician are musicians, so half of this list is music, biographies, and memoirs. So those musical subjects will be the first 5 that I talk about in this list, and then the last 5 will be some non-musical subjects. So if you get tired of me talking about music, you can skip to the second chapter and see the non-musical books that I chose for this list. Third thing, as a musician, I've had, throughout the years that I've had this channel, a lot of you ask to hear my music. Well, you're going to hear that today. I shot a video a couple years ago that ties in really well to one of these biographies, so I'm just going to go ahead and insert it. So I hope you enjoy just a little bit of music that I'm going to perform for you partway through this video. Let's start with probably the shortest book on this list, and this is Why Sinatra Matters by Pete Hamill. And this is obviously a biography of Frank Sinatra, but it talks about his cultural relevance, and it talks about more than that. One of the things in here that really stuck with me is, unfortunately, there's a propensity in America for society to kind of hate the newest immigrant. So at one point in our history, the newest immigrant were the Italians. And the ways that Frank Sinatra, just because of his great voice and how he was beloved by everybody, actually kind of changed the thoughts about people towards that immigrant group. That's a small part of this little thin biography, but it does talk about Sinatra quite a bit. It makes you want to listen to Sinatra. It's a really great book. Pete Hamill's a great writer. He's written a great fantasy novel that I really love called Forever that nobody seems to have read but me. And I do want to read his memoir, A Drinking Life. But Why Sinatra Matters is a really great one. Up next, my favorite composer and my favorite historical figure are one and the same, and that is Ludwig van Beethoven. Beethoven, just thinking about his life, he was the best piano player in all of Europe and the up-and-coming composer who was going to be the next Mozart, and he realizes that he's losing his hearing. The thing that makes him better than everybody else is his keen ear, and how he persevered through that to go on to write the greatest compositions ever heard, including his Ninth Symphony, which may be the greatest musical composition ever written, which he wrote when he was 100% deaf. I've read 6 or 7 Beethoven biographies, and my favorite is still Maynard Solomon's biography just called Beethoven. Now, there are some newer ones that have more modern scholarship that probably put some of the facts in this in dispute, like Jan Swafford came out with one a couple years ago that's very good and very complete. But I still find this the gold standard for Beethoven biographies. I feel this brings Beethoven, the human being, to the front a lot better than the other ones. Additionally, I like the way that he structured this book. Each chapter talked about the historic and biographical things that were happening in Beethoven's life. And then at the end of the chapter, he would talk about the musical compositions that he was writing at the time. And I think breaking them apart, is a great way to kind of structure this book. It also makes it a little bit more readable for people that may not be as interested in all of the details about the musical compositions as someone like me, that they could skim or even kind of skip some of those sections at the end. But this is a fantastic biography. Solomon is the one who solved the mystery of the Immortal Beloved, or at least figured out when that letter was written for Beethoven. Additionally, this is the one where I feel that I can see Beethoven the man more clearly than in any other biography. This is one I've read 3 times, and I'll definitely read again, as well as probably a few more Beethoven biographies along the way. Up next, all my musician friends, when you see this one, you're going to sit there and you're going to nod knowingly, because I could not have a list like this without Miles Davis autobiography. Miles Davis, one of the most important jazz figures ever, one of the people that ushered in the prominence of bebop and then continually changed throughout his career after that. The Birth of the Cool, Sketches of Spain. Even at the very end, he was trying to find a way to fuse hip-hop and jazz. Admittedly, he was unsuccessful in doing that. But this biography is fantastic. It really feels like you're just sitting in a room with Miles and he's telling you stories. Now, one little caveat with this. It's very profane. If you don't like profanity in your books, you definitely want to avoid this one, because for Miles Davis, the ultimate compliment he could ever pay you is to call you an MFer. So this book is replete with profanity all throughout. If that turns you off, don't pick it up. But if you're interested in reading a very interesting book, very interesting voice, because again, these are his words, I give this my highest recommendation. Miles Davis Autobiography is a must-read for fans of jazz and fans of American music in general. Up next is another jazz biography, and that is the brilliant biography Pops, A Life of Louis Armstrong by Terry Teachout. Pops, as he was known. Louis Armstrong is one of the seminal figures of jazz, one of the earliest great figures of jazz. How Louis Armstrong made his mark on jazz was because of just, he was such a supremely talented individual. Up to this point, jazz was kind of these Dixieland bands where it was all about the ensemble and everybody playing together as an ensemble. But when Louis Armstrong would take a solo, people would listen, and he changed the entire trajectory of jazz. Here's one of those solos. Tell by the beard that was a couple years ago. Anyway, that was West End Blues, and that was the opening cadenza that Louis Armstrong started, and then the opening melody that I played along with the recording when we got to that point. This was recorded in the 20s with his Hot Five, as they were called, and you could hear just the technical virtuosity that Louis Armstrong had. He revolutionized jazz. Additionally, you learn a lot how later in life he was a figure in the civil rights movement. Although newer and younger generations didn't appreciate him, they saw him as kind of an Uncle Tom figure because he was the one who played for the whites. He always had the smile on his face, but that's who he was. It's a fantastic biography. If you're interested in a very important jazz figure, Pops, A Life of Louis Armstrong by Terry Teachout is definitely a must-read. And the last one in the music category is actually a 2-volume biography of Elvis Presley. This is by Peter Guralnick. And this, I'll probably put this on the thumbnail. This is one of the most complete, but most riveting and well-written biographies I've read of any subject. It's 2 volumes. The first volume is The Rise of Elvis Presley, Last Train to Memphis. And the second volume is The Unmaking of Elvis Presley, Careless Love. I often say that one of the reasons that I enjoy reading fiction more than nonfiction is that I feel fiction writers are just a little bit more gifted in their command of the English language. And then you read something like this by Guralnick, as well as like the last book I'm going to talk about in this video today, and you realize there are some very, very talented nonfiction writers out there as well. Although Guralnick is a journalist, his prose exceeds that of a typical journalist. And what he really brings out is just the humanity in Elvis's story. If you're a fan and you haven't read this, why? But if you're not a fan, I know it's kind of daunting. It's 2 volumes, but it's so, so good. You will cry when Elvis's mother dies, and you will just lament kind of the unraveling of this individual who was just kind of lost from that point forward in his life. It's a fantastic read. I highly recommend it for anybody. All right, on to the non-musical subjects. The first one I want to talk about is a thin but very, very, very powerful book, and that is Night by Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel was a teenager in Auschwitz, and this is that story. This won the Nobel Prize. I first saw this book. I had honestly never heard of this book, and I first saw this book when some of my students were reading it. I think it was required reading for 9th grade one year. And I will often do that some years. I will pick up a book that my students are reading just to have just another point of conversation with them. I think it's especially effective as a teacher to be able to converse with some of the quieter students that are bookworms like me if we're reading the same things. And I'll just never forget. That's one of the reasons I love this book. Besides this book just being amazing, is just those conversations that I had with those students about this and their keen insights into the Holocaust at their young age. It's something I wish I had read when I were younger. And when I reviewed this originally, actually it was the reread when I reviewed this on the channel, the little blurb on the front says everything you need to know about it. It's a slim volume of terrifying power. Night by Elie Wiesel. It's really a must read if you have any interest in reading about the horrors of Auschwitz and the Holocaust. This is one that you really can't miss. The second one on this list, similar topic. This is The Choice by Dr. Edith Eva Eger. Dr. Eger was also an Auschwitz survivor, but this doesn't deal with the horrors like Night does. This deals with the aftermath. Specifically, how do you go forward after enduring and experiencing the horrors that they endured in this unfortunate situation in Auschwitz? How do you live a fruitful life? How do you allow yourself to experience joy or love or any of those things? And part of it is just a choice of allowing yourself to move past and to not forget, but to allow yourself to move on and experience these things. This is a fantastic book. This is a book about just seeing someone who's seen the absolute worst of humanity and trying to find the best and live their best life. Another powerful book. This is probably the best nonfiction book I've read since I started the channel. The Choice by Dr. Edith Eva Eger. My nonfiction read of the year last year was Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. Stories growing up in South Africa. The title says a lot about what is within. Trevor Noah was born a crime because he was mixed race heritage, which under apartheid was a crime. And this book will bring out just about every emotion you can imagine. You will laugh like crazy. You will cry. You will cheer. You'll be angry. And Noah has a very distinct narrative voice, and not just on the audio. I listened to the audio, and the audiobook is fantastic because Noah's delivery is picture perfect. He brings out accents of all the different characters, and he brings characters to life in such a great way. But even just the text itself, there's a very, very focused narrative here of all of these stories and how they weave together. It's a powerful, powerful book. It's so, so good. I went in knowing virtually nothing about Trevor Noah. So if you're a Noah fan, you definitely need to read it. But if you're not, like me, I don't consider myself a Trevor Noah fan. I know he started the Daily Show after Jon Stewart left, I think, is kind of his claim to fame. But I really don't know anything about him beyond this memoir. But this memoir is fantastic, and it's one that I love. Another one that's on audio that I loved, that I listened to last year, was Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. Now stay with me here. A McConaughey book, top 10? Yeah, this book was so much fun, especially listening to the audio. I honestly don't know if I read it with my eyes if it would be as good, because McConaughey's delivery of McConaughey's words, I mean, chef's kiss. So well done. And even if you poo-poo McConaughey as kind of this Texas boy that does a little bit of acting, don't forget, he's an Oscar-winning actor. He talks about his craft, which is a form of method acting in there. He talks about his story. He talks about a lot of the different roles, what he brought to the different roles. And then he has a lot of this kind of Texas folk wisdom, which if you like McConaughey, you'll love it. If you don't like McConaughey, you may not love this book like I do. But if you like kind of McConaughey's brand of himself, you'll probably enjoy Green Lights, especially the audiobook. Final book on this list, and it's the one that I think is the best, is Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. This book is nonfiction, and it's almost unbelievable. If an author were to go to a publisher and pitch the life of Louis Zamperini as a novel, I guarantee the publisher would say, that's not realistic. There's no way that all of those things can happen to one person. And it's true, from being shipwrecked to being a POW to dealing with substance abuse and all the different things that Zamperini deals with in Unbroken. It's such a powerful book. And I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the Guralnick book, but Laura Hillenbrand, she is a treasure as an author. She is supremely gifted, easily one of the best that I've read in nonfiction, who has a command of the English language like the greats that write the novels that we all love. But Unbroken is just a story of resilience. It's so, so powerful. For some reason, when this was huge, like 10, 15 years ago. There was a movie which was very good, not as good as the book. The book's always better. But if you did not jump on that bandwagon then, jump on it now, because Unbroken is unbelievably powerful book. The narrative power will suck you in. You'll put this down so, so quick because you'll just be so compelled by Louis Zamperini's life. And it's something that will stick with you probably in your entire life. Unbroken, definitely one not to miss. All right, so those are 10 I love. Here are 5 that I want to read at some point. I read Robert K. Massey's great biography of Catherine the Great about 15 years ago, and he has 4 biographies that follow the Romanovs, and the next one I would like to read is Peter the Great. So that one's on the list. Another book, if you Google best memoirs, this one is pretty much on everybody's list, and that's Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt. Just seems like one that sounds fantastic. A music-related one, of course, is the memoir Mozart in the Jungle by Blair Tyndall. A musical biography that I want to read is about Dmitri Shostakovich, who was a composer who had to live during the Stalin era and face the censorship and the denouncement of the state of him and his music. And the biography I want to read is Shostakovich, A Life by Laurel Fay. And then the last one, you saw 2 of the books on this list dealt with the Holocaust. I've never read The Diary of Anne Frank, so that's kind of a must-read for me. So those are 10 biographies and memoirs that I love and 5 that I hope to read. I would love to talk with you about any of those if you've read any of those. Additionally, I know a lot of you read biographies and memoirs because when I do my monthly wrap-ups and ask what you've read, a lot of you put those types of books in the comments section. So let me know what your all-time favorites are. I'd love to hear it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Twitter, Goodreads, and the Fireside Discord. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.